Hello again, I'm back with another episode of RWBY Is, but before we start, I want to extend my thanks to Tumblr user Canonseeker, both for donating to my coffee and for compiling this amazing list of RWBY analysts that I can highly recommend, link in the description. Today, we're discussing the narrative of Weiss vs. Jacques and the structure of this arc, which I will note meshes well with my RWBY's long-form storytelling as discussed in another one of my videos. I focus on this because I've seen some argue her victory over him was too rushed or convenient, and while opinions on that are largely personal and will vary, I do have my own stance on the subject. So, to kick things off on a controversial stance, I will say this. Volume 8 was not Weiss's moment of triumph over her father. That moment came in Volume 4, when after Volume 3 capped off 3 volumes of hinting and background building with him stealing Weiss away from her found family, Weiss shattered the gilded cage and cast off any means by which he could control her and returning to her original goal of being a huntress and her team. Following that, he isn't a major factor, in part due to distance. We see that the harm he's done to Weiss hasn't vanished with her anxiety about Atlas and his presence in general, but Weiss's entire tenure at Beacon was built on defiance of her father, and with her team beside her, even him using her loved ones against her won't grant him any sway over her. He has, in essence, lost the war already. This makes her suspicions of his behaviour during the election more about RWBY's overarching plot than her own personal story on a practical front, i.e. discovering Watts. While the personal became more about reconnecting with her family from seeing her mother's efforts to protect them held back by her broken spirit and being reminded that Whitley was too a victim of Jacques. That is why those elements and the harm he did to them carry forward even after he's gone but don't pertain to him. Personally, I think it was all well set up. Jacques was blatantly unpopular candidate and made a seemingly mad decision to try and force votes. There was a conveniently timed massacre, and the prospect of Jacques having cheated or even collaborated with Salem was raised and led to an investigation that only Weiss could have conducted amongst the heroes. Some might argue that the cameras were convenient, but given we know that Willow did still fight with Jacques and clearly resented him but was too disempowered to act openly, I think her secreting away cameras is fairly believable and a rather clever expression of quiet defiance. The Watts revelation would also have worked just as well if Willow was simply backing up Manor security, so it's not like the plot resolution hinged on something unsustainable either. Ultimately, Jacques' role as any type of arch-foe ended when he lost control of Weiss in Volume 4, and the STC's ability to serve as a looming threat was always heavily reliant on Atlas, and we know how that turned out for them. Thus, his final defeat here was Weiss tying up loose narrative ends and opening the way for familiar resolutions with Willow and Whitley. That's all for today, folks, though I will hopefully begin work on another episode soon. If you want to support my efforts, there are links to my Ko-fi and Patreon down below, and as I am between jobs right now, I'd really appreciate the help. You can also find written stories and 3D art on my Patreon, and I am debating expanding the scope of this channel to maybe discuss other shows and even comics. 3 things about insert comic character here? Maybe, we'll see.